Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. I got to tell you something, people. 30 years ago, I had moved from Vegas to San Diego. My ex-wife wanted to move there, and I was working for Planet Hollywood, and one opened in San Diego, so we moved, and we lived in the gas lamp. And I remember getting into the gas lamp, and I was walking around. We lived right in a loft, and I saw the restaurant called Croce's. And being from the Philadelphia area, I was wondering if it was to do with Jim Croce. And it was opened by Ingrid Croce. And I believe I remember seeing signs of my guest today playing there. I may be wrong, but my guest is AJ Croce. How you doing, AJ?
Hey, how are you?
Good. Now, did you used to gig there? Because I swear to God, I used to have a Sunday brunch. I knew there was a great Sunday brunch at Croce's there on, I think it was 5th Street. I used to walk by it. And but I think I saw a sign. Did you gig there a lot?
Yeah. At that time, 30 years ago, my first record had already come out. So I was on the road touring around the world at that point. It was kind of chaotic. But when I was home, when I used to live in San Diego, when I was there, I would pop in, try out new stuff, and sometimes play next door with my band. But yeah, I mean, I remember friends and I used to throw shows before there was a jazz bar or the Top Hat, which was like a 200-seat place. Before they opened, we used to throw these parties and shows down in the basement of that cool old Victorian building that Croce's was in. And I think my mom saw that it could be really successful to have music there, and there was no place for young people to go and see like jazz and blues and stuff like that. It was all drinking establishments. So it was definitely a wonderful place to play and a learning experience because it was underage. There were old laws in place that you couldn't have amplification. So I had to shout over the grand piano, which definitely in the early years, 36 years ago, informed my vocals on the early records because I was always shouting over the piano to be heard.
Was there you said younger. Was there younger people having the starvation for jazz? Because like I grew up with a family, where my dad had played the sax and we had different cool albums, but a lot of kids I grew up with didn't really dig jazz. Was there a scene like for you when you were young playing that kind of jazz?
Yeah, it was interesting. It was, kind of part of what was the holdover from the 79 revival of the mod English thing. There was, of course, in the 60s, that whole mod thing with the Who and Small Faces and all of that. But part of that scene was like people loved modern jazz and bebop and stuff like that. And it was part of that modernist movement. And in that scene, yes, people completely loved old jazz, old blues, old soul, old funk. It was something in Southern California that was like a almost counterculture in its way. And yeah, there was punk rock that was influential, but it all Cramps or X or the Blasters, might have been through rockabilly or it might have been through this or that, but it was sort of informed by that, by all different types of music. And the more outside the box in a way, the better.
It's funny. I can't remember the name. There was a punk club. I lived in the gas lamp in downtown San Diego, like on the outskirts. And I forget the name, but it was. I wish I remember the name. It was on
the big one.
What was it?
Casbah was. Yeah. And and Tim Mays started doing that. In fact, the band I was in the mid '80s opened the Casbah, and when I started off playing around town, I was playing solo piano, and then in jazz clubs and blues bars and some rock and roll places, piano bars, and then I was in a rock and roll garage band, very 60s influence, Byrds and Etta James, old R&B, Arthur Alexander covers, that kind of stuff. And then I also was in a group that was, kind of pre that 40s swing dance craze that came in the 90s. In the 80s, we were doing a bunch of stuff like that, doing that Louis Jordan kind of influence stuff. So there was a lot of different things and interest in stuff that was unusual or forgotten or, I don't know, esoteric in its way. Anything that wasn't mainstream or MTV for my friends and I was interesting.
So you have the new album coming out March 7th, Heart of the Eternal. And let me ask you, what does it go into making an album? I wonder, you've been in this game for a long time, and your dad was a great lineage of a songwriter. How is when you sit down, and I want to know if it's changed over your career, because I ask you this is because I was a touring stand-up comedian and I stopped, but I'm doing it again. So my writing has completely changed. I used to overthink everything. Now I just go, screw it. As you get older, you have the confidence. You go on the stage, you go, hey, if the shit doesn't work, I know it will. But for you, when you attack this new album, how do you attack writing a new album? Because you have to write, you have to encompass everything.
Mm-hmm. It's not unlike writing stand-up in the sense that it's trial and error. My music has always been about the performance of it. So in testing out new material, I'm doing it just like you would. And I'm a storyteller on stage, and I talk about not just where the song came from, but the maybe idiosyncrasies of life around why I wrote it in the first place. And I think it's, in the case of this album, which was a little different than anything I'd had in most of my career, I actually had a lot of time to write it. My last album, which came out in 2021, was a covers album. The album before that was an original album in 2017. So I had a lot of material, and I had to pick and choose. And then I'm always writing. So it was a combination of finding the best, most interesting music to me, and yet it had to somehow hold together as a conceptually, musically, it had to live in the same world. And so while it's pretty diverse, I think, style-wise, influence-wise, genre, era-wise, where it comes from, I do feel like it really holds together. I hadn't had that much time to put a record together since I was a kid, since my first record. And I was 19. So I really hadn't been working on it that long in hindsight, thinking about it. But with this, I had a lot of time to work on it. Also, I worked on the music before I had lyrics to most of the material, which is kind of different than I've done in the past. And it really, at this age and after this, long of touring and having these experiences and life experiences, really allowed me to sort of meditate on what the music meant, like what is the story that the melody is telling, the harmonies are telling, the rhythm is informing me of, and then move from there.
Well, that's an interesting. That's interests me because I always think, I can't write songs. That's a given. I can't play an instrument. I suck. My brother was good at drums, and I just not good at instruments. But for you, I've always thought as a songwriter, you write the words first, like you said you did in the past. Now, how hard is it though? I mean, I can sit there, if you think of a chorus, and then you can think of the music to accompany it. But when you sit down and just do it musically, and then you have to write the words, I mean, how hard is that? Because it's a matter of you already have the formulation of how the song sounds with the music. So I think you'd have to sort of maybe try to cram the words in or just make it work. I mean, I think it'd be very hard.
Look, I'll be honest. I'm kind of, I've always been a historian about this stuff, a musicologist. I didn't feel like I could create something new without really understanding how the history of it and the old music, the music I love, was created. And they were duets. They were duos that were songwriting duos going back to the 1800s. Yes, there were plenty of people that wrote by themselves, but by and large, you were going to be more successful with one person writing words and one person writing music, whether it was the Gershwins or whether it was collaborations that Jerome Kern had with P.G. Wodehouse, or whether it was, Rodgers and Hammerstein or whoever it was. One person wrote the music, one person wrote the lyrics. For me, I was always wearing both hats, so it wasn't foreign to me to look at a piece of music and write a story to it. The one thing that is flexible, there's nothing precious about songwriting. It has to be treated as an exercise for fun, for joy. It's a puzzle. It's how you tell a story. How you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Is it universal? You have to ask yourself a lot of questions as you're writing it. Who's going to relate to this? From what point of view is it coming from? And I think for me, it was looking at it in those ways. Yeah, sometimes I need to either find a way to, make it one syllable less, or I need 2 more syllables for this space. It's more about the small details, it's so often about a personal pronoun or an article and figuring out, how do I communicate this? How do I simplify it? How do I streamline it? And I think so in that way, yeah, there might be a little tweak here or there with the music or with a lyric to make sure that it fits and sings well. You find when you're singing it, you write it all out, then you go and perform it somewhere, you try it out, and you're like, oh, I've got to change this line, or I've got to switch the second verse to the first verse, or it's too long, or it's too short, or we need a solo here, or whatever. The arrangement of it kind of comes with playing with it, just like stand-up comedy. You kind of have a sense of the tempo of it. You have a sense of the punchline and how long you can wait. Timing is obviously critical.
Now, when you go and you play a song for the first time live, like I did a storytelling show 2 weeks ago at a place, and it was completely different than stand-up, because it's a story, but you have to get laughs, but you're not depending on the laughs. And I'm going to tell you, man, I was nervous as shit. I was thinking, well, what if no one laughs? Our mind as a comic is triggered, laugh, laugh, laugh. So you get nervous. When you play a song for the first time live that you wrote, that you're proud of, I'm sure you're proud of all the songs you write, except the ones that don't make your album. Do you sit there? Are you a little like, man, I hope these people like this? And does it get in your head at all? Because I would think it's, for me, music is so personal. Like, jokes are jokes, but music's so personal. Do you get nervous at all when you do that song for the first time? Or do you have confidence right out of the gate? Because even if the crowd doesn't go crazy about the song, they like you, and you are a performer. You've been on stage so many times.
I feel pretty confident about it. Every once in a while you're in a situation where you're performing someone else's song, and I feel that way. Like, I want to make sure that I do justice to this. Say it's a benefit, and it's all focused on one, songwriter or one artist, and you're asked to go and be a part of it. Well, in that case, sometimes I feel a little bit of well, I hope I do this well. But I've been touring for 35 years, and it's like the act of performance comes pretty second nature at this point. So I don't have a real sense of nerves when I'm performing my own material. It's just generally, I feel good about it. Or if I didn't feel good about it or proud of it, I wouldn't be doing it. There are plenty of songs I don't feel proud of, but like I said, nothing's precious. Sometimes it's just the exercise.
Now, when you wrote this album, and I'll be honest, I've heard 2 of the songs. I didn't get a copy of the album. I've heard 2 of the songs. I heard I Got a Feeling and Complications of Love. They're completely different. Okay, and there's a song called Hey Marguerite on it. I'm sure that's different. Yeah. But when you're attacking this new album, and because now music's so different. Like when we were growing up, I love the 80s metal. Then someone threw like the ballad in, and so you could get different senses. But now I think a lot of people listen to music, the younger people, they all want to hear one thing. So when you attack this,
Yep.
like, how do you come? Like, do you sit there? I mean, what's your mood like to write something that Complications to Love, which is very acoustic, to one I Got a Feeling, which is sort of funky, bluesy, ZZ Top-ish, like the cool guitar work. Do you have to be in a certain mood? I mean, I want to know where you get, like, because you're doing a lot of different genres. You wake up one day and go, hey, I'm going to write something acoustic, or do you just go to the studio?
Well, no, they're totally, they're written in different times, sometimes different years, years apart, sometimes days apart. And it really varies, each song on this album has like its A side or B side, however you think of whichever, that's for the audience to decide. But they have a partner on the album that kind of where you understand that, okay, these two songs kind of live in the same world. Like and Hey Margarita and I Got a Feeling, they live in the same world. I use this old 40 salt shaker mic, which sounds like I'm singing through an old radio, and it's all a little broken up, and you got this kind of funky the guitar lines, the influences are different. I Got a Feeling came from that psychedelic soul of like Shuggie Otis and Chambers Brothers and Sly and the Family Stone, and Margarita, although texturally, sonically in the same world, kind of came from influence of like Hubert Sumlin's guitar playing with Howlin' Wolf, or like Link Ray style, a little distorted guitar tone that I just loved. I love his playing, and that style of music. So, in that case, that was that. Now with Complications of Love, that was something I wrote as an instrumental piece initially. It was something I wrote on guitar, and I wrote it on electric, and it was just a kind of initially a way to practice those Django diminished scales. You'd hear Django playing, and it's kind of a tango in a way. It's like a tango meets Django, and so stylistically different, but when you hear them in a row, when you hear those songs on the record, it kind of all makes sense. Sometimes you have to hear it as a whole to be able to make sense of it. But yeah, I mean, I've done that my entire career. I think that drawing from different influences, styles, eras, genres, has always kind of been my thing. More so than ever, I've been able to really take that and make it my own in a way that is, I think, for a lot of people, why they come to see and hear what I do.
Okay, now, you said you've been doing this for 35 years. You've been recording, and you've had a very successful career. Lyrically, how have your lyrics changed as you've gotten older and you've grown? You're a man now. When you're younger, things are different. I mean, how has that changed from your 20s to your 30s to your 40s, now your 50s? How has it changed? And you've had a lot of tragedy in your life, and that's, does that affect your lyrics? Sometimes are you just fucking pissed and you write something, something bad happens, you're just like, or how does it affect like your life, the stages? How's it affected you with your lyrically writing?
Of course, the stories affect me, but tragedy and trauma, that's universal. We all experience that. So how do I find a way of communicating that in a way that's unique? How do I keep it simple? I think keeping things simple is what I've learned as I've gotten older. That idea of things not being precious. Also, I think there were a lot of lyrics I was writing when I was younger that were metaphorical, whereas I probably write more conversational lyrics now, and it still varies depending on the song. Sometimes a song can have sort of you can use a metaphor, somewhere in a conversational song, but by and large, they kind of live in their own worlds. You have a metaphorical lyric that Bob Dylan did a lot, or you have a conversational lyric like like my father wrote a lot, and not that those two examples didn't write, esoteric lyrics and conversational lyrics for Dylan. I mean, everyone that does this for long enough tries to learn how to communicate the best they can, and in a way that they can identify with. I feel like I'm trying to write music that doesn't have a time or an era. The way that I know how to do that is by borrowing from a lot of different times and eras and genres, and combining it into a form that is, while somehow familiar, also not like anything you've heard. So I'm trying to consciously be aware of the simplicity of the story, the power of it, the emotion that I feel, and then also remember that we all want to laugh. We all want to have I think it's important to have a sense of humor about your tragedies in life. If you can't laugh at life, then you really are going to struggle every day. So I feel like it's just a part of it. Each song is uniquely different in that way. Songwriting is it's a daily practice, and it's a calling, and it's a puzzle. It's a lot like solving a crossword, writing a song.
Now, and this sounds like a weird question. You've probably been asked before. What got you into music? I mean, we know your dad was Jim Croce, and growing up near the Philadelphia area, we heard that a lot. We heard that. I mean, that because he was from the area. That it's like anything where we heard a lot of Hall & Oates. Like the radio stations would play them. But as a kid, because he passed when you were around 2, you never felt the impact. But did you just feel that there's music in your body, or what made you start playing it? And what age were you? Because I know you started at a very young age.
I'm a 5th generation musician. People know my father. They may not know my great grandfather sang opera. So my grandfather put himself through medical school at Temple University, by playing music. My grandmother on my mother's side was a professional musician and had her own television show in Philadelphia in the 40s. My mother, of course, was an artist and recorded with my father in the 60s. It's in me from way back on both sides of my family. And it's a calling, certainly. I started gravitating towards the piano as soon as I could walk, before I could walk. My father's record collection was immense and beautiful and deep, and it was, and there was so much in there. And, and I lost my sight when I was 4. I think Ray Charles became a kind of a mentor. His records became inspirational. Stevie, of course, became inspirational. I got turned on to all the, the blind blues guys, Blind Blake and Blind Lemon Jefferson, Willie McTell, and on and on and on. Because they were, inspirational in that way. And I think it was at 12 years old, I got hired to play a gig and paid $20. I got to play Chuck Berry and Ray Charles and Memphis Slim songs, and people dug it. And then, when I was a teenager, I was playing out and practicing, and I was playing for making a good living at 15. At 16, I was out with Floyd Dixon playing shows all around. And at 17, Mae Axton heard me play. And Mae wrote Heartbreak Hotel for Elvis. And she called up Cowboy Jack Clement and said, "You've got to hire this kid." And that was the beginning. It was the beginning of, I came in, I'm filling in for Jerry Lee Lewis. He walks out as I walk in. It's Elvis's band. I'm in way over my head, but I pulled it off to some degree, at 17. I made it work. And I think that, having that encouragement from people, and later on getting to, work with Ray and touring with all those soul icons like the Nevilles and Aretha and James Brown and Ray and Taj, and then also touring with rock and roll bands like, Rod Stewart, Santana, Jeff Beck tour that I was on, Bill Graham tours. They informed me along the way about building confidence, feeling good about what I was doing, proud of what I was doing. I felt like, I always knew that people were expecting something because of my father, but there was nothing that I could actually give them that I felt in my heart was going to satisfy what they wanted, which was essentially him. No one is a carbon copy of anyone else. The idea is bizarre. I think people want to hold on to something. They both want you to be completely unique and completely the same at the same time when you are connected to a celebrity. They want to feel like they got to be with that celebrity when they're with you. And that's a very bizarre state to be in. But, renown kind of does that to people. It's very bizarre.
Now, it's funny you brought something up, because of your dad's name. When you were, and you do live in a shadow, like when you're younger, people probably do put you in the shadow because that's just common sense, because people, it's common. But for you, when you were starting out, and when you were getting older and starting to write and performing, did you ever feel like I should write songs like my father? And then on the other side of your head going, if I write songs like my father, people are going to say he's writing songs like his father. Because most musicians don't go through that. You were in a very awkward position, because if you wrote like him, they go, oh, that doesn't sound like Jim Croce. But if you didn't write like him, they go, well, why doesn't he sound like Jim Croce? What when you started writing?
It's a no-win. Yeah, it's a no-win situation. I think the hardest part, I'll be honest, the hardest part of being, related to someone well-known is just that there's probably nobody that I know that when they look at me, they don't also think of someone else. And so, I don't know you, I don't know your family. And I can talk to you and only think about you and our conversation and what I, whether I think what you said is funny, intelligent, whether we have a good conversation or I am not thinking of anyone but you. And you don't realize what a privilege that is, because there's hardly anyone that can look at me, listen to me, come and see my concert, even if they love what I do, without thinking of someone else. And so you're in a bind. You have to embrace it. You have to embrace a facet of it. And I think that by performing the Croce tour, that I did, the Croce Plays Croce, for nearly 3 years, late in my career, it was at a point when no one expected to hear me do my father's songs anymore. And also I felt like I was in a better place to really do a wonderful job of interpreting them without being a cover band, without it being just my dad's music, and so I never expected the outcome, which is that all of a sudden there was these people that were not familiar with me before, who only came because my father's music got turned on to what I do, and I think they were shocked because they didn't realize that I spent 35 years practicing every day to be great, and I take it seriously. This is not. What I'm playing in an evening musically is far beyond what my father ever had a chance to do or practice, because I've practiced every day for my entire life. My father had a very brief career, 18 months, and he was really wonderful. What he accomplished in 18 months is profound. It's what most people could dream of in a full career. But what I think people see when they see me live is someone who's spent an entire career dedicated to their craft.
Now, when did you start embracing it. You said, you had to embrace that people would see someone else. And I think that would be so overwhelming for someone. And as what you said to me, like, you talk to me, you don't know anything about my family. And so I'm interviewing you, I'm talking to you, and that's what I do. I talk to people. But for you, when did you start embracing the fact that you're going to go through that for the rest of your life? Now, people will sit there and look past that. They will sit there and go, like, now when I'm talking to you, I don't think, oh, it's Jim Croce's son. I think, oh, it's A.J. Croce. He's a good guy in San Diego, stuff like that. But at what age did you start sitting there and accepting that? Because I think that would be something very hard to accept, because I think it would maybe build self-doubt. I can't even explain, because I have not been in that situation. But when did you start accepting that you're going to meet people who are going to sit there and say, oh, it's Jim Croce's son? When did you start embracing it?
I don't know that I ever fully embraced fandom. Of course, I appreciate the love that people feel for my father's music. There was something very personal about his music, and I think that personal nature made people feel like they knew him, that he belonged to them. Well, I think that's what fanaticism is partially about. People have become fanatic about something or someone, and it's it's a little unhealthy. I saw it my entire life. So when did I embrace it? I think there was part of me that knew that that was part of life. I knew that as an artist, I needed to be as great as I could be, because I had pride in what I was doing. I feel like I have my own identity, and that's the thing that's taken from you when you are related to someone who's well known, is your identity. Your identity becomes melded with someone else's. So as much as people want to talk about my father, there's a point where I go, okay, well, what else are you interested in? Because it's a big world, and there's a lot going on, and we're human beings, and you and I have a lot in common. The person that's not with us, we have less in common with, because right now it's us. And I think that being real is hard for people. And I think it was part of my job description. And I do understand the fandom on a certain level. I know people that are the children of well-known artists, and there's all different. They're unique individuals. Some of them are inspired and ambitious, and some of them are not. Some people have been, psychologically affected to such a degree by this stuff that they struggle every day. I don't. I feel grateful for a certain part of what that has brought, but I feel like the big answer to your question was that when I took over my father's publishing, when it reverted in the late 90s, early 2000s, I felt really very responsible for protecting his musical legacy. And by protecting his musical legacy and working behind the scenes and being able to talk confidently, I wasn't a great salesman of my own work, but I could be a really great cheerleader for my father's work, because I believed in it, because I still believe in it, and I want to protect that musical legacy and make sure that it's heard by a new generation, but that the catalog's not abused. And I think that in embracing that, there was a part of him that I embrace, that I protect, and it's the part of him I think he was most proud of. It was the part of him he felt most secure in, which was his writing, his music, his art. To be the child of we're all children of someone, and to be the person who is protecting that person that we love who raised us or didn't raise us. Protecting their memory is it's pretty heavy. It's pretty profound. And I think that in doing that, I've found a new identity at that time. And also in, going through all of those home recordings, my father was a prodigious home recorder. He had a woolen sack tape recorder. As soon as there were cassette tapes, he had a cassette recorder. I have probably 200 home recordings. And that's what I grew up. People say, oh, you didn't know him. I kind of got to know him. I have 200 hours of my father hanging out with friends, playing music, writing songs, talking about the world. It was a gift that most people don't have when their family dies. And so, yeah, I do. I feel like it's my job to protect his legacy, and in so doing, and also separate from that, protecting the legacy of two generations of Croce music.
Now, you said something that piques my interest. You said you never been. You love being the cheerleader for your dad's career now, but you never sold your career as much. Is there a reason? Because you're a talented musician. Is it one of those things where you didn't believe in yourself, or why wouldn't you sell it when you've recorded a bunch of albums? Was it just something that inside you that you felt maybe? I don't know. It's interesting because I think all performers do that. I think we never give ourselves the full confidence. There's always a person who's overconfident who usually sucks. But what is
I think there's also really great artists who are incredibly arrogant and egotistical, and I think there's a certain. I don't know that I had a fully developed ego, in the sense that. Because maybe partially because of what we just spoke about. Maybe it was also because I just didn't feel comfortable bragging. Also, there was a lot of, I got asked to play with people. They didn't need me. They didn't need me to sell tickets. They didn't need my dad's story. They didn't know him. They didn't know me. They asked me to come because they liked what I did. I didn't ever feel, in that way, like I was like, if Ray Charles wants you to come and play with him, you're good at what you do. If Allen Toussaint wants to hang out and make music and comes to your shows and wants to sit in, you're freaking good at what you do. And if Leon Russell wants to write with you, then you're good at what you do. I didn't have a lack of confidence in what I do. I just had a lack of ego as far as selling it. It just never felt comfortable to say, yeah, there's no one that plays piano like me. And there isn't. Am I the best? No one's the best. Music is not a competition. Art is not a competition. Art is beautiful and an expression of our humanness and our humanity. There is, this aspect of it where, finding that balance of feeling pride in what you do and also being braggadocious it wasn't comfortable. I had have my own label, but what was the struggle for me was early on when I first started this indie label was like, okay, well, initially it was just my music that was on it before I had other artists on it, and I was like having to call radio stations, PR firms, all of this marketing, and I can't sell myself the way that I can sell someone else that I believe in. and no one's gonna believe it when I tell them, hey, this is the best thing I've ever done, or check out this song, I really dig it, I think you're gonna dig it. Like, they're like, yeah. And also there was the other part of it that was like a tightrope walk, was that I was never really attracted to fame or fortune. I wanted to play music. I didn't care if I was going to be playing a party or a wedding or a bar mitzvah or whatever. If I can make a living playing concerts at theaters and the beautiful venues I'm able to play at now, then great. But if I can't, I'm still going to be playing. I'm not above playing brunch. Not above playing along with someone else who has a good gig, and if they want me to play, I just didn't have an ego like that. I didn't have to be the center of attention, but by circumstance became the center of attention, and it, I guess in some ways that wasn't always comfortable.
Now, what does it feel like? Like, I know you have a picture and a video clip on your Facebook page with you and Allen Toussaint playing. What does it feel like when you're sitting there jamming with, like you're looking? I mean, do you ever sit there and go, "Holy shit!" Like, I'm playing with this guy who I look up to. I mean, it's one of those things. Like, I get it when I interview people. I remember seeing your name in front of, in San Diego. So it's for me. It's always like, wow, I'm getting to talk to this person. What is it like when you're sitting there and like, you're doing your art, man. You're doing what you love. I mean, does it just consume you? I mean, does it take you to a different level, or what happens?
Yeah, I think that it has sometimes. It just depends on the situation, depends on the person, depends on their what they're bringing to it. Allen Toussaint, of course, was a huge influence. The stuff that he wrote and produced for Irma Thomas and Lee Dorsey and the Meters and Dr. John and on and on and on, and his own music as well, was really influential. It was, so I had reverence for music he had done and music he still does or did at the time, before his passing. And I think, having personal time, it wasn't as if he just came out of nowhere. We had recorded some together. We had a week of hanging out and eating and drinking and having casual conversation. It wasn't. I think that really makes it made us closer in that moment, and so when I know that he's capable of doing this kind of music, that we both were influenced by things that were long before both of us, that and I can say, hey, you want to do this thing in this key or whatever, and he'd be like, yeah, absolutely, and so we just dive in, not knowing where it's going to start or end. I had that experience with Bill Payne last year at the Ryman, where Little Feat happened to be recording in town, and I asked him to join in on a song, and it was so much fun because I didn't know where it was going to start and where it was going to end, but I knew it was going to be a really fun ride. And so, in both situations, it was so much fun. I was very much living in the moment.
Now, you mentioned, I want to ask you, the Croce on Croce. Croce Plays Croce. Mm-hmm. What made you decide to finally do that? Because you sat there, you worked your career breaking away from that. And then you do this, and I know it's what people want. And you said you gain new fans from her because they probably came to see you. Then they examined your catalog and go, wow, he's got a lot of good stuff out there. But what made you sit there and decide to do it? Was it you were just ready? Did you have an epiphany? Or how did it, because it's something that
it came over time. The first step was in the early 2000s. I was archiving a bunch of my father's music and a bunch of those tapes I was talking about earlier, and there was this one particular reel-to-reel tape that was one song after another, really obscure, deep cuts by artists most people don't know, Fats Waller, Bessie Smith, Pink Anderson, Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, Mississippi John Hurd, Jimmy Rogers. I can go on, but like this is what was on that particular recording, and I had played every one of those exact songs, and when I say Fats Waller, it wasn't Ain't Misbehavin' or Honeysuckle Rose. It was You're Not the Only Oyster in the Stew. There's like a deep cut in the Fats Waller catalog, and I realized we had all of this music in common, and I had been playing these same songs, and so. I knew, obviously, I was informed by his record collection as a kid, so that was a starting point. And then there was the connection of all the music and of course, working behind the scenes in hearing all of his writing and how it progressed and how he became the artist that he became. And it wasn't overnight. It was, I think... another thing that encouraged me to do it was what would have been his 70th birthday about 12 years ago or so. It was deciding to play a bunch of the songs, celebrate his birthday. And in doing so, I was like, I saw the reaction of the audience, just how profoundly moved they were, that there were tears and there was laughter. It was very emotional. I could tell that there was a nostalgic aspect of it that was really strong. And I also learned in that moment that, like, if I couldn't just do a night of Jim Croce songs, that I had to put myself in there. So by making it 70% his music and 30% my music, and in that mix of 30%, make it, incorporate some of the songs that we had in common, some of those really obscure pieces of music, regardless of every night it changed, that was the other thing that informed it. And then putting together the stories in between and writing it all out. It was not unlike writing stand-up or writing a one-man play, because it needed to have a through line. It needed, for my own sake of needing to be creative on the spot and having improvisation as part of things, needed to have it loose enough that I had a lot of spots to improvise, so that I'd create a framework for this. And in doing so, I became a better performer. I became a better storyteller. I became a better entertainer in general. So the show evolved up to a certain point, and then incorporating all of the lights and the magic, all the videos and the things that are going on behind me in that show. It was a long process. It didn't happen overnight any more than my father's evolution as a writer came overnight.
Now you're on tour. Now you're starting your tour. What can people expect? Like, and do you? I mean, is there ever nights you just don't feel like getting on stage? Like, when I did comedy, there's nights I was just like, man, I don't feel like driving, this far for gigs. Like, now I just take gigs near me. Someone's like, you want to come? I'm like, I'm not driving to Doylestown on a Friday night. I don't feel like dealing with the Northeast Extension and that bullshit. But for you, what can people expect for you on this tour? How much of the new album will you play? Because it's not out yet. So I think that would help people sit there and go, oh, we really dug that. We got to get that album. So
yeah. It comes out next week, so it'll be out soon. But it's available at the shows. So
okay, cool.
Anyone that comes, they can pick it up and take it before it comes out. So in that way, that's cool. Yeah, this show is very unique, and it's kind of special in its way, because it's a new stage in my career. There's an evolution in what I'm doing as a performer. Because
explain that evolution.
Well, when I started off, I would have maybe a starting song and an ending song. There was no real necessarily an arc to the performance. I've obviously now I have a framework of that. But I have with the Heart of the Eternal tour, I'm going to play whatever, the singles. I'm going to play a few of the songs each night, but a lot of people are coming to hear my old stuff as well. So I'm going to play the 10 albums that preceded Heart of the Eternal, play, some of Heart of the Eternal. I mean, a couple things off each. I know there's still people that are coming to see the Croce Plays Croce show, so I'm going to incorporate and have incorporated, several songs. Every night I take requests, open the request line, and people can shout stuff out. And we play all kinds of stuff. It could be a Faces song or a Mose Allison song or a Ray Charles song, an old, blues song or rock and roll song. Chuck Berry. It could be any number of things that someone shouts out. And we're pretty fluid. The band is so amazing. I've got a stage full of Grammy-winning musicians here, really iconic players. Gary Malaber's playing drums. It's my band from the record is on stage. First time I've really been able to make everything sound like the record on stage. I think that's really a powerful thing because, we have Gary Malaber, who, was on Moondance, Tupelo Honey, St. Dominic's Preview, all those great Van Morrison records as the drummer. Also, he was with Steve Miller Band for 28 years, all those great 70s recordings, and Joe Walsh and Peter Frampton and Bonnie Raitt and Springsteen and on and on and on. So, his beat, his groove. David Berard plays bass and sings with me. He was with Dr. John for almost 40 years. We met through Dr. John, but he was started off with Allen Toussaint, so we've got that connection. And then he was with Etta James, and I also was a label mate with her and got to play with her. And we had a lot of people in common. He was with the Nevilles right before I went out with the Nevilles, and he was with B.B. King right before I was out with B.B. King. And so it was like we had all these connections, but his main gig for all those years was with Mac, with Dr. John. And then my guitar player, James Pennebaker, is wonderful. It's multi-instrumentalist. I'm bopping all around playing keys and then electric guitar and acoustic, going from violin to electric to acoustic to this to that. He's just super versatile and wonderful. And you heard him with everyone from Freddie Fender to Fogerty to, Adelbert McClinton, Leroy Parnell, and just the list goes on. And the singers are great. They're just, they bring this soulfulness and beauty to the stage. And so that's the thing about this show is that there's so much joy on stage. What we do that is, I think, pretty unique is that when you come to the show, I think people are hoping for something good. And I feel like they're pulling for me when they come. And I think as soon as we start, everyone's forgotten about everything that they came, the preconceived notions or ideas. When we hit, it's like, oh, I didn't know that we were going to get this. And it's this energy and just sheer love and joy that they feel from us, because I feel it every night. Do I get to places and not want to play? No, not really. Sometimes getting there is hard, right. Sometimes getting, I'm in the middle of nowhere right now, just making sure that I got Wi-Fi here was that was a little hard, but I'm playing a sold out show in the middle of nowhere, in this great theater. So how wonderful is that? These people came from all over the place to come and fill this theater tonight. So, I feel pretty grateful to be able to do what I love. I feel grateful to be asked to do what I love. And so the gratitude, I think, is really felt as much as the joy of the music.
I have one final question. Looking back at your career, and as you said, we've talked a lot about the things your career and what you've had to deal with, and not people, people knowing you and stuff like that. What are one or two things that you're really proud about? Because, people, I talk to actors who are proud that they put their kids through college doing their craft. There's so many different answers. Some people, that we're still doing this, TV writers, we're still working. But what are a few things that you're proud about? Because you've had a good career, and, and of course you're probably proud of your career, but what are some things that personally you're proud about?
I'm proud that my kids call me every day. without being asked. They like me, they love me. I'm proud of the fact that my relationships and friendships have lasted, a lifetime, and that my closest friends see me as being worth loving and reliable as a friend. I think that being a good friend and a decent human being is probably like the greatest thing anyone could call you. I think that I'm proud of always wanting to be better at what I do. I'm proud that I take the time to do it. I'm proud that even though I wake up and I don't feel like practicing, I don't feel like doing this thing, that by doing it, in the end, I see the results of it. And I'm proud to be able to do what I love. That is, it's a roller coaster of a occupation. This is a calling. There are times when things are good, and then when they're not, you can't. No one wants to hire you, or you don't get to play those same places, or we'll give you a door deal, or we'll do this or that, and it's like you were just, it's 0 to 0 in this business, and then back up again, and if you can take it. I think I'm really proud of the fact that I don't discourage easily, that I have the dedication to the craft and to the audience to be the best that I can every night.
That was awesome. I'm so glad we got to talk. I wish you were playing in Philly, but you're not. But I checked your tour. I'm like, oh, man, he's going to come to Philly. The people go buy the album.
I was just there in January.
What's that?
I'll be back. Don't worry. I was just there in January at the Keswick, so I'll be back.
People buy the album. Also go to ajcrocemusic.com. You can find all his information there, and you can buy that album when it comes out. And also go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 1,030 episodes there. You can email me at cooper@coopertalk.net. And that's about it. I want to thank you for listening. Don't forget, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you next time.